Photos you need to see. The email subject line glared at me from my phone screen. When I opened it, my coffee mug shattered on the kitchen floor along with my 15-year marriage. There was Richard, my husband, wrapped around a blonde bombshell, on a beach resort I'd never seen, while he was supposedly at a business conference in Chicago. Photos of my husband, my Richard, with another woman flooded my inbox, their sun-kissed bodies framed against turquoise waters of a beach resort I'd never seen. The email subject line read simply, "Thought you should know." I felt my legs give out as I sank to the kitchen floor, still clutching my phone with white knuckles. This was how I discovered my husband of 15 years had been living a double life, and why, 3 months later, I would sell his precious car collection and our dream house while he was on yet another business trip. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Leah Rocks, and until that moment, I believed I had the perfect life. Richard and I had met during our final year of college. He was studying business. I was finishing my degree in architectural design. We married 2 years later in a small ceremony surrounded by close friends and family. Richard's career in investment, banking flourished, while I put my own ambitions on hold to support him, managing our home and raising our daughter Lily, who was now 13. We had built what I thought was a beautiful life together in our custom-designed home in Westlake Hills, an exclusive neighborhood just outside Austin. Richard's passion for classic cars had grown with his success, and our 6-car garage housed his collection, each vehicle meticulously maintained and worth more than what most people earn in years. I had always found his enthusiasm endearing, even if I didn't fully understand the appeal of spending small fortunes on automobiles that mostly sat gathering dust. That Tuesday morning had begun like any other. Lily had left for school, and I was planning a charity fundraiser I was chairing. That month, Richard was on day 4 of a week-long trip to Chicago for an investment conference. At least, that's what he had told me. I had just poured my second cup of coffee when my phone chimed with a new email from an address I didn't recognize. I almost deleted it, assuming it was spam, but something about the subject line, "Photos you need to see," caught my attention. Perhaps it was related to the fundraiser? I clicked it open without a second thought. The first image loaded, and my coffee mug slipped from my fingers, shattering on the kitchen tile. There was Richard, my husband, his arm wrapped around a woman I'd never seen before. They were on a beach, drinking colorful cocktails, looking relaxed and intimate. The timestamp showed it was from yesterday, when he was supposedly in Chicago, giving a presentation on market trends. My hands shaking, I scrolled through image after image. Richard and this woman, young, blonde, stunning, having dinner at a romantic restaurant, walking hand in hand along a moonlit beach, kissing beside an infinity pool with a view I didn't recognize. And the final photo, the two of them in what was clearly a luxury hotel room, the bedsheets tangled around them. The accompanying message was brief but devastating. "I thought you should know that Richard and I have been together for over 2 years. He promised he would leave you after Lily's birthday last month. I'm tired of waiting and being the secret. Ask him about our trips, to Bora Bora, Santorini, and now Maldives. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this. Natalie." The room seemed to tilt as a wave of nausea washed over me. 2 years? While I had been planning dinner parties and attending his company functions, believing our marriage was solid, he had been building a relationship with someone else. All those business trips that had gradually increased in frequency. How many had actually been vacations with her? I scrolled through the images again, looking for any sign that they might be manipulated or fake. But there was no denying the truth. The watch I had given Richard for our 10th anniversary clearly visible on his wrist as he embraced this woman. The distinctive scar on his shoulder from a childhood accident. This was real. My next thought was of Lily, my beautiful, sensitive daughter who adored her father, who would be devastated by this betrayal. My hands trembled as I forwarded the email to my personal account, then deleted it from my inbox. I needed time to process this, to decide how to confront Richard, to figure out how to protect my daughter from the fallout. I called my closest friend, Diana, barely able to form coherent sentences through my tears. "He's cheating," was all I could manage to say at first. Diana, who lived just 3 streets away, arrived within minutes, letting herself in with the spare key she'd had for years. "Oh my God, Leah," she gasped, taking in the sight of me still sitting on the kitchen floor surrounded by broken ceramic and spilled coffee. "What happened?" I wordlessly handed her my phone, the damning images still displayed on the screen. Her expression shifted from concern to shock to fury as she scrolled through them. "That absolute bastard," she muttered, setting the phone down and kneeling beside me. "How did you get these?" "She sent them," I said, my voice hollow. "His mistress. Apparently she's tired of being the secret." Diana helped me to my feet and guided me to the living room couch while she cleaned up the broken mug. As the initial shock began to fade, it was replaced by a cold, seeping anger. I thought about all the times Richard had missed Lily's school, events because of unavoidable meetings, the weekends I'd spent alone because he had to fly out to see clients, the nights I'd waited up only for him to call and say he'd be working late. "What are you going to do?" Diana asked, handing me a glass of water. I took a long sip, trying to clear my head. "I don't know yet. He's not supposed to be back until Friday. I need to think." "Do you want me to take Lily for a few days? She could stay with us, have some time with Emma." Diana's daughter was the same age as Lily, and the girls were close friends. The thought of having to face my daughter, to maintain a facade of normalcy while my world was imploding, was overwhelming. "Would you mind, just until I figure out what to do?" Diana squeezed my hand. "Of course, whatever you need." After she left, I found myself wandering through our house, the house Richard and I had spent 2 years designing together. Every corner held memories, now tainted by his deception. I moved as if in a trance to his home office, a space I rarely entered. It was his sanctuary, where he claimed to work on evenings and weekends when he was home. I sat at his desk, running my fingers over the polished mahogany surface. Had he been communicating with her from here, planning their rendezvous while I was just down the hall? I opened his desk drawer, not even sure what I was looking for. Inside was a stack of receipts and a small velvet jewelry box. My heart stuttered as I opened it, revealing a pair of sapphire earrings I had never seen before. The receipt tucked beneath them was from last month, over $5,000 from a high-end jeweler. Not for me. Never for me. I continued searching, finding credit card statements he had apparently forgotten to shred, dinners at restaurants I'd never been to, charges at hotels in cities where he supposedly had business, but at amounts that suggested luxury accommodations rather than standard corporate booking, and flight receipts, not to Chicago, but to Male, capital of the Maldives, dated just 5 days ago. As the evidence mounted, so did my anger. This wasn't just an affair, it was a systematic betrayal, carefully planned and executed over years. While I had been managing our household on the budget he allocated, believing we were saving for Lily's college fund and our retirement, he had been spending lavishly on another woman. I reached for the phone, my finger hovering over Richard's. Contact. What would I even say? How do you begin a conversation about such a monumental betrayal? And did I want to hear his excuses, his inevitable lies? No. I needed time. Time to think, to plan, to decide what this meant for my future. For Lily's future. I returned to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of the expensive Bordeaux Richard had brought back from a business trip to France last year. Had she been with him then too? I sipped the wine slowly, my mind racing through possibilities and scenarios. By the time Lily came home from school, I had composed myself enough to suggest the impromptu sleepover at Diana's with a cheerfulness I didn't feel. Lily, excited about spending time with her best friend, didn't question it, although she did ask if everything was okay. "Just fine, sweetheart," I lied, hating myself for it but knowing it was necessary for now. "I just have some work to catch up on, and you'll have more fun at Emma's." After Lily left with an overnight bag, the house fell silent. I stood in our grand foyer, looking up at the vaulted ceiling and spiral staircase that led to our bedroom. Sweet. Everything around me, the artwork on the walls, the designer furniture, even the flowers in their crystal vase, felt like props in a staged life that had never been real. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Conference running long today. Miss you and Lily. See you Friday." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I stared at the message, bile rising in my throat. How easily the lies came to him, how casually he maintained this fiction. I didn't respond, though my fingers itched to confront him, to shatter his carefully constructed deception with the truth I now possessed. Instead, I opened my laptop and began to research. Divorce attorneys, Texas property laws, bank statements and investment portfolios. As an architect, I was detail-oriented by nature, and now I channeled that focus into understanding exactly what my options were. By midnight, sitting amidst a sea of printed documents and legal notes, I had the beginnings of a plan. Richard had underestimated me, had perhaps mistaken my support for weakness. He was about to discover just how wrong he had been. As I finally climbed the stairs to sleep in our guest room, unable to face the bed we had shared for 15 years, I paused by the wall of family photos. Richard, Lily, and me, smiling at the camera during our trip to Yosemite last summer. Had he been texting her even then? Planning their next rendezvous while posing for family pictures? I gently took the frame from the wall, removed the photo, and tore it precisely down the middle, separating Richard from Lily and me. It felt symbolic, necessary. "This is just the beginning," I whispered to the empty house, tucking the half, with Lily and me, into my pocket and letting Richard's half flutter to the floor. The woman who had entered this house this morning no longer existed. In her place stood someone new, someone who would no longer accept lies, no matter how beautifully packaged they came. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those images, Richard and Natalie laughing, kissing, betraying me with every captured moment. By dawn, I had moved past shock into a strange, detached clarity. I showered, dressed in my most polished outfit, a charcoal pencil skirt and cream silk blouse that always made me feel confident, and headed downstairs with purpose. The morning light streamed through our floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the pristine kitchen where I'd built countless family meals. I opened Richard's sacred liquor cabinet, selected his 25-year-old Macallan whiskey, the one he'd spent $3,500 on and saved for special occasions, and poured myself a generous glass. It burned going down, but I welcomed the sensation. Something real in a life I was discovering had been largely artificial. My phone buzzed with a morning text from Richard. "Big presentation today. Should close the Peterson account. Call you tonight." I stared at the message, picturing him typing it while lying next to her in their luxury resort. Did he laugh after sending it, pleased with how easily he could maintain his deception? I didn't reply. Let him think everything was normal. For now. Instead, I called Megan, our family attorney, or rather, the attorney who had handled our wills and house purchase. A woman I'd chatted with at charity events but never truly confided in. Now, I needed her professional expertise more than ever. "Leah? This is a surprise," she answered, her tone warmly professional. "I need to meet with you, Today, if possible. It's... My voice faltered slightly. It's about Richard. Something in my tone must have alerted her. I have a cancellation at 11. Can you make it then? By 10:30, I was sitting in my car outside her downtown office, rehearsing what to say, how to transform my personal humiliation into legal strategy. The folder on the passenger seat contained printouts of the damning email, screenshots of our financial accounts, and the credit card statements I'd found in Richard's desk. Megan's office was a sleek, minimalist space, all glass and polished concrete with stunning city views. It should have intimidated me, but I felt oddly at home here. This was a place where emotions took a back seat to facts and strategy, exactly what I needed. So, Megan said after her assistant had brought us coffee, what's going on? I placed my phone on her desk, the email with Natalie's photos open. My husband has been having an affair for at least 2 years. His mistress sent me these yesterday. Megan's professional demeanor slipped momentarily as she scrolled through the images. Jesus, Leah. I'm so sorry. I need to know my options, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Legally and financially. She set the phone down, her expression shifting back to lawyer mode. Let's talk about that. Texas is a community property state, which means assets acquired during marriage are generally split 50-50, but there can be exceptions. Do you have a prenuptial agreement? I shook my head. We got married right after college. Neither of us had anything to protect. For the next 2 hours, Megan walked me through the divorce process, custody considerations, and financial implications. I learned about temporary orders to protect assets, the importance of documentation, and strategies to prepare for what would likely be a contentious separation. Do you think he suspects that you know? She asked as we concluded. No, he's still texting me about his business trip. He's supposed to be home Friday. Megan nodded thoughtfully. That gives us time. I recommend you do several things before he returns. First, secure copies of all financial records. Bank statements, investment accounts, retirement funds, everything. Second, open your own bank account at a different bank and transfer enough money for immediate living expenses. Legally, you're entitled to access your joint funds. Won't that tip him off? I asked. Possibly, but protecting yourself financially is crucial right now. Richard has clearly been living a double life, which suggests he's comfortable with deception. We need to assume he might take steps to restrict your access once he knows you've discovered the affair. As Megan continued outlining my next steps, I felt a strange sense of empowerment replacing the devastation of the previous day. This was actionable, concrete. Something I could focus on besides the images of my husband with another woman. What about the house? I asked. And his car collection? Megan's expression grew cautious. Those are significant assets that would be divided during divorce proceedings. I strongly advise against making any major decisions about property right now. Judges don't look kindly on spouses who liquidate assets before legal separation. I nodded, not sharing the thoughts already forming in my mind. By the time I left Megan's office, armed with a folder of legal information and a list of recommended actions, it was nearly 2 p.m. Rather than going home to our empty house, I drove to Westlake Community Bank where Richard and I had our joint accounts. Mrs. Mitchell, what a pleasure, said Brian, the branch manager who had handled our banking for years. I didn't correct him on the name. I was still Mrs. Mitchell, at least for now. What can I help you with today? I need to check some information on our accounts, I said with a practiced smile. Richard is traveling, and there are some financial matters I need to handle in his absence. Brian's helpful demeanor never wavered as he pulled up our account information, confirming what I already suspected. There were accounts I knew nothing about. Specifically, a separate checking account, in Richard's name alone with a balance that made my stomach clench. Over $200,000 sitting in an account I hadn't even known existed. Could you print monthly statements for all our accounts for the past 2 years? I asked, maintaining my composure. Of course, Mrs. Mitchell. It might take a few minutes to compile. Everything. While waiting, I opened a new checking account in my name only, transferring $50,000 from our joint savings. It was less than I was entitled to, but enough to ensure Lily and I would be secure in the immediate future. I also requested a credit check, discovering 2 credit cards in Richard's name that I'd never seen, both with substantial balances and payment addresses at a P.O. box rather than our home. After leaving the bank, a strange restlessness overtook me. I couldn't face going home yet, to the shrine of our fabricated perfect life. Instead, I found myself driving to Hillside Park, where Lily had played as a toddler. I sat on a bench overlooking the playground, watching mothers with their young children, feeling simultaneously disconnected from and bonded to them. How many of these women were also living lives undergirded by lies? My phone buzzed with a text from Diana. "Lily's having dinner with us. How are you holding up?" I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. How was I holding up? I didn't even know. Part of me felt numb, operating on autopilot. Another part simmered with a rage I'd never experienced before, not just at Richard's betrayal, but at my own blindness. How had I not seen this coming? Had I been so absorbed in creating the perfect home, being the supportive wife, that I'd missed the signs? "Taking care of things," I finally replied. "Thank Diana for keeping Lily. I'll pick her up tomorrow." As the afternoon faded into evening, I finally returned home. The house felt different now, less like a sanctuary and more like an elaborate stage set. I wandered from room to room, seeing everything through new eyes. The living room where we'd entertained Richard's colleagues, everyone complimenting our beautiful home while my husband secretly built a life with another woman. The kitchen where I'd prepared countless family dinners, believing I was nurturing our relationship. The family photos that now seemed like props in an elaborate deception. I ended up in the garage, staring at Richard's prized car collection. 6 vehicles, each worth more than most people's annual salary. The vintage Porsche 911 he'd restored himself. The Ferrari he drove only on perfect summer days. The classic Aston Martin he'd called his investment piece. Each one meticulously maintained, lovingly cared for. Unlike his marriage. I ran my hand along the sleek lines of the Ferrari, remembering how excited Richard had been when he brought it home. How he'd insisted I come for a drive even though I'd been in the middle of preparing for a charity event. Had he shown the same enthusiasm? To Natalie? Had she sat in the passenger seat, wind in her hair, laughing at his jokes while I managed our household and raised our daughter? My hand tightened on the car door. For a moment, I imagined taking a sledgehammer to the gleaming paint job, shattering the windows, destroying what he loved as he had destroyed what I loved. But no, that would be temporary satisfaction at best. And Richard had taught me something important. There were more subtle, devastating ways to hurt someone. Back in the house, I opened my laptop and began researching luxury car dealerships and collectors within driving distance. Then I poured another glass of Richard's precious whiskey and began drafting an email to a real estate agent I knew, not to list our house, not yet, but to get a current market valuation. The sun had long set by the time I closed my laptop. Tomorrow would be a day of action, but tonight I needed to process. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, no, not ours anymore, and began systematically removing Richard's presence. His clothes went into suitcases, his toiletries into boxes, his bedside reading into the trash. By midnight, it was as if he had never shared the space with me. I fell asleep in the center of the bed, no longer confined to my side, a dreamless sleep born of emotional exhaustion and newfound resolve. When dawn broke, I was already awake, my mind clear, my purpose defined. Richard had underestimated me, had taken for granted that I would always be the accommodating wife. the silent partner. He was about to discover just how wrong he had been. The following morning, I awoke with purpose and a pounding headache, Richard's expensive whiskey exacting its revenge. I swallowed 2 aspirin and stepped into the shower, letting the hot water wash away the physical remnants of yesterday's emotional storm. Today, I needed clarity. Today, I would discover just how deep the betrayal went. After dressing, I headed to Richard's home office again. Yesterday, I'd barely scratched the surface of his deception. Now, I methodically went through every drawer, every file, every hidden corner. In the back of his filing cabinet, behind tax returns from 3 years ago, I discovered a folder labeled simply Property. Inside were documents for a condominium in downtown Austin, a luxury 1-bedroom with stunning city views, purchased 18 months ago. The ownership was listed under an LLC I didn't recognize, Horizon Ventures. The signature on the purchase agreement, however, was unmistakably Richard's. My fingers trembled as I examined the paperwork. A secret apartment, bought while I was planning our family vacation to Colorado, thinking we were saving for Lily's college fund. I tucked the folder into my bag and continued searching. The bottom drawer of Richard's desk was locked. Something I'd never paid attention to before. After 30 minutes of searching, I found a small key taped beneath his desk chair. Inside the drawer was a sleek laptop I'd never seen before. When I opened it, the login screen appeared. I tried Richard's usual password, our anniversary date followed by Lily's birth year, but it was rejected. After several failed attempts, I sat back, frustrated. What would Richard use as a password for his secret life? On a hunch, I typed, Natalie, followed by what looked like a date from one of the vacation photos. The screen unlocked, revealing a desktop with minimal icons. The email application opened automatically, loading messages between Richard and various contacts, most notably, dozens of exchanges with N. I clicked on the most recent thread, dated just yesterday. Missing you already, Richard had written. Meeting went well. Peterson account secured. Back to real life on Friday, but counting the days until Paris next month. Natalie's response made my blood run cold. I hate when you go back to her. When are you going to tell her about us? About everything? You promised after the Miami property. Closed. Miami property? I frantically searched through the emails, finding references to real estate investments, offshore accounts, and business ventures I'd known nothing about. Richard hadn't just been hiding an affair. He'd been concealing an entire parallel financial life. And then I found it. Emails discussing asset protection strategies with a financial advisor I'd never heard of. Strategies explicitly designed to hide money during a potential divorce. If you transfer these assets now, before any divorce filing, they'll be much harder to trace, the advisor had written 6 months ago. The Cayman structure offers significant protection, especially if we move forward before year-end. Richard had been planning to leave me for at least half a year, methodically hiding our assets while maintaining the facade of our marriage. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I'd been silent partner not just in our marriage, but in my own systematic financial dismantling. My phone rang, startling me from my shock. Diana's name flashed on the screen. Hey, I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. How are you doing? Diana asked, concern evident in her tone. I trailed off, unsure how to encapsulate the magnitude of what I'd discovered. It's worse than I thought. Much worse. What do you mean? He's been hiding money, buying property, planning to leave me. My voice cracked. There's a financial advisor helping him hide assets before filing for divorce. Diana's sharp intake of breath was audible. That conniving bastard. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. I need to talk to Megan again. I glanced at my watch. And I should pick up Lily soon. Actually, that's partly why I called. Emma asked if Lily could stay another night. They're working on some science project together. I thought it might give you more time to, figure things out. The relief was immediate. If you're sure it's not an imposition. Of course not. Take all the time you need. After hanging up, I turned back to the laptop, downloading as many incriminating emails as I could onto a USB drive I found in Richard's desk. The evidence of his calculated betrayal grew with each message I read. This wasn't just about Natalie. This was about Richard systematically dismantling our financial future while I remained oblivious. I closed the laptop, replaced it exactly as I'd found it, and locked the drawer. Then I called Megan. "I need to see you again," I said when she answered. "Today, if possible. I've found evidence that Richard has been hiding assets." 2 hours. Later, I was back in Megan's office, spreading printouts across her desk. Emails about offshore accounts, property purchases through LLCs, discussions of divorce strategy, dating back months. Megan's expression grew increasingly grave as she examined the documents. "This changes things significantly, Leah. What Richard's doing here, it's not just unethical, it's potentially illegal. Hiding assets during divorce proceedings is fraud." "But he hasn't filed for divorce yet," I pointed out. "No, but these emails clearly show intent. He's deliberately concealing marital assets in preparation for divorce. That's acting in bad faith." She tapped one of the emails. "This financial advisor he's working with, Trevor Wilson, I know him by reputation. He specializes in helping high net worth individuals shield assets from spouses and creditors. Some of what he does operates in legal gray areas. So what does this mean for me?" Megan leaned forward, her expression intensifying. "It means we need to move quickly, before Richard can hide anything else. I'm going to recommend we file for divorce immediately, with an emergency motion to freeze all assets. We'll request full financial disclosure and specific injunctions preventing any transfers of property or money." The word divorce hung in the air between us. Despite everything, despite the photos and the emails and the mountain of evidence of Richard's betrayal, hearing it stated so plainly made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "Leah?" Megan prompted gently. "I know this is overwhelming, but time is critical here. Based on these emails, Richard is actively working to disadvantage you financially. Every day we wait is another opportunity for him to hide more assets." I nodded, swallowing hard. "Do it. File the papers." "There's something else you should know," Megan added, her tone cautious. "Given the evidence of fraud, we could potentially pursue criminal charges. Financial fraud in divorce cases can lead to significant penalties, including jail time in extreme cases." The thought of Richard in jail, Richard, who was so concerned with appearances, with maintaining his reputation in the business community, was momentarily satisfying. But then I thought of Lily, of how devastated she would be not just by our divorce but by seeing her father criminally charged. "Let's hold that as a last resort," I said finally. "For Lily's sake." Megan nodded understandingly. "Of course. For now, let's focus on the divorce filing and asset freeze. I'll have the paperwork ready for your signature tomorrow." As I drove home, the weight of the day's discoveries pressed down on me. Richard hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. He'd been meticulously planning to betray me financially, to leave me with as little as possible while he started his new life with Natalie. The calculated nature of it, the months of planning, made the betrayal exponentially worse. I pulled into our circular driveway, noticing how the late afternoon sun glinted off the perfectly manicured landscaping I had designed and supervised, part of creating the showcase home Richard had wanted. Everything around me, from the imported Italian marble in the foyer to the custom cabinetry in the kitchen, had been selected to project an image of success and perfection. An image as false as our marriage had been. Inside, the house was quiet, too quiet without Lily's presence. I wandered from room to room, seeing everything through new eyes. The living room where we'd hosted dinner parties for Richard's colleagues, everyone complimenting our beautiful home while he secretly planned his exit. The kitchen where I'd prepared countless family meals, believing I was nurturing our relationship while he nurtured a separate life. I ended up in Richard's study again, staring at the evidence of his duplicity. The locked drawer that had contained his secret laptop, the filing cabinet where he'd hidden the condominium documents, the desk where he'd presumably planned vacations, with Natalie while I believed he was working late. My phone buzzed with a text. Richard again. Closing dinner with Peterson tonight. Might be late calling. Kiss Lily for me. I stared at the message, fury building in my chest. The casual deception, the easy lies, all while he systematically worked to destroy my financial future. I thought of the asset protection strategies, the offshore accounts, the secret properties. I thought of Natalie's message. I hate when you go back to her. In that moment, something crystallized within me. This wasn't just about surviving Richard's betrayal. This wasn't even about getting my fair share in the divorce. This was about justice, about consequences. Richard had spent months, perhaps years, calculating how to leave me with as little as possible. Now it was my turn to calculate. I opened my contacts and scrolled to a name I hadn't called in years, Bennett Fuller, a college friend who had gone on to become one of Austin's most successful luxury car dealers. Bennett? It's Leah Rocks. Mitchell now, though that's about to change. I took a deep breath. I need your expertise on something. How quickly can you move 6 high-end cars? As the sun set over our soon-to-be former home, I sat at the kitchen, island, laptop open, making lists, sending emails, formulating a plan. Richard had taught me an invaluable lesson. Preparation was everything. He'd had months to plan his exit strategy. I had less than 48 hours before he returned. It would be enough. Morning dawned with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. After signing the divorce papers Megan had prepared, I found myself sitting in my car outside a sleek high-rise in downtown Austin, the building where Richard's secret condominium was located. The property documents I'd found included a key, card for the resident garage, which I now held in my trembling hand. Part of me questioned whether I should be here at all. The rational, cautious Leah, the woman who had managed charity functions and hosted dinner parties with perfect poise, argued that I should leave this to the lawyers. But another part, a stronger part, needed to see this place with my own eyes. Needed to confront the physical reality of Richard's betrayal. I swiped the card at the garage entrance and followed the directions to visitor parking. The elevator required another keycard swipe, which granted me access to the 18th floor. The hallway was all understated luxury, plush carpeting, soft lighting, and the faint scent of citrus in the air. I found Unit 1806 and stood before the door, heart hammering in my chest. The key from the document folder slid smoothly into the lock. For a moment, I hesitated. Once I opened this door, there would be no pretending, no going back to the comfortable illusion of my marriage. Then I turned the key and stepped inside. The apartment was immaculate, clearly professionally decorated, in minimalist whites and grays with strategic pops of blue. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of downtown Austin. It was beautiful, expensive, and utterly devoid of personality. No photos, no mementos, nothing that would identify its occupants, except for the lingering scent of an unfamiliar perfume. I moved through the space like a detective, noting the high-end appliances in the unused kitchen, the expensive whiskey, the same brand Richard kept at home, on the bar cart. The bedroom featured a massive platform bed with rumpled gray sheets that no one had bothered to straighten. On the nightstand sat a woman's watch and a dog-eared paperback. The closet revealed more, a section of Richard's clothes, items I recognized from our home, hanging beside women's garments, designer dresses, cashmere sweaters, things I would never buy on the household budget Richard had always insisted we stick to. In the bathroom, her toiletries mingled with his. 2 toothbrushes in the holder, her makeup scattered across the counter. This wasn't just a place for clandestine meetings. This was a home they shared. While I managed our household and raised our daughter, Richard had been building this parallel life, complete with domestic routines and shared spaces. I sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the tangible evidence of his deception. My phone rang, Diana checking in. I let it go to voicemail. What could I possibly say? That I was sitting in my husband's love nest, surrounded by evidence of his double life? A notification pinged, an email from Megan confirming that the divorce papers had been filed and the emergency motion to freeze assets was scheduled for a hearing the following morning. The legal machinery was in motion. I should have felt relieved, empowered even. Instead, a wave of desperate sadness washed over me. 15 years of marriage, a daughter we both adored, a life we'd built, or that I thought we'd built together. All of it sacrificed for this sterile apartment and a woman young enough to be his intern. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually, a wild idea took hold. What if I tried to talk to Richard, really talk to him, confront him with what I knew, appeal to whatever decency might remain in the man I'd once loved? Perhaps for Lily's sake, if nothing else, we could find a way through this that didn't involve courts and asset freezes and the public dismantling of our family. Before I could reconsider, I pulled out my phone and dialed his number. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Of course. He was supposedly in meetings all day. I tried again, this time using the emergency code we'd established years ago, calling 3 times in succession, which meant drop everything and call me back. Within minutes, my phone rang. Leah? What's wrong? Is it Lily? Richard's voice held genuine concern, the first authentic emotion I'd heard from him in who knew how long. We need to talk, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. Now. I'm in the middle of a meeting. Can it wait until tonight? No, it can't wait. I'm sitting in your downtown apartment, the one you bought for you and Natalie. Silence stretched across the line, so complete I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. How did you... He finally began. How I know doesn't matter. I cut him off. What matters is that we talk, face to face, today. Another long pause. I'm in Dallas. No, you're not. You're in the Maldives with Natalie, or were until yesterday. The vacation photos came directly to my inbox, Richard. All of them. The sharp intake of breath told me everything. Leah, I can explain. Save it. I don't want explanations over the phone. I want you on a plane back to Austin today. We need to talk about what happens next. About Lily. His voice shifted, taking on the placating tone he used with difficult clients. Of course, you're right. But I can't just leave in the middle of... Yes, you can. And you will. Or the next call I make is to your firm's partners, with copies of those vacation photos attached. I wonder how they'd feel about you conducting business meetings with your mistress on white sand beaches. A heavy sigh. Fine. I'll get a flight back today. But Leah, this conversation isn't going to go the way you think. Just be here. I ended the call. As I left the apartment, locking it behind me, doubts crept in. What was I hoping to accomplish? Richard had been methodically planning his exit for months, hiding assets, creating this separate life. Did I really believe a face-to-face conversation would change anything? Yes and no. The rational part of me knew this marriage was over. Had. Been over long before Natalie's email arrived in my inbox. But another part needed closure. Needed to hear from Richard's own lips why our life together had meant so little to him that he could discard it for luxury vacations and a downtown pied-à-terre. And maybe, just maybe, a direct confrontation would shock him into doing the right thing, handling our divorce with honesty and fairness, prioritizing Lily's well-being above all else. Back at home, I paced restlessly, alternating between certainty that I was doing the right thing and fear that I was making a terrible mistake. Should I have just left everything to the lawyers? Was attempting to reason with a man who had methodically deceived me for years an exercise in futility? I called Megan to inform her that Richard was returning early. "Are you sure this is wise?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. Men like Richard can be unpredictable when cornered. "I need to try. For Lily's sake. Maybe if we talk face to face, we can work out an amicable separation." Megan's skepticism was palpable even through the phone. "Just be careful. Don't sign anything, don't agree to anything, and call me immediately if you feel uncomfortable or threatened in any way." By early evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Landed. Meeting with Peterson running late. Will be home around 9. Still lying. Still clinging to the fiction of his business trip even as he scrambled to manage the crisis of being discovered. The realization strengthened my resolve. This man, this stranger wearing my husband's face, deserved no consideration, no attempt at reconciliation. Yet when the front door finally opened at 9:30 and Richard walked in looking travel-worn and wary, something inside me wavered. This was the man I had loved for 15 years, the father of my child. Despite everything, my traitorous heart skipped a beat at the familiar sight of him setting down his briefcase in the entryway, loosening his tie with that habitual gesture I knew so well. "Leah," he said cautiously, his eyes taking in my composed posture at the kitchen island. "I came as soon as I could." "Did you?" I replied, ice in my voice. "Interesting, since your return flight from the Maldives landed at noon. Where have you been for the past 9 hours, Richard?" His face tightened. "I had things to take care of." "Things? Or people? Did you stop by the condo to warn Natalie, to make sure she'd cleared out her makeup before I found it?" I laughed bitterly. "Too late for that." Richard sighed heavily, dropping the pretense. "This isn't how I wanted you to find out." "How exactly did you want me to find out? With divorce papers? After you'd finished hiding all our assets in the Cayman Islands?" His head snapped up, eyes widening in surprise. "How did you—" "I know everything, Richard. The offshore accounts, the Miami property, the asset protection strategies to shield money from me in the divorce you've been planning for months." I pushed a stack of printed emails across the counter toward him. "Did you really think I was that stupid? That blind?" Richard's expression shifted, the facade of contrition falling away to reveal something harder, colder. "What do you want, Leah? Money? The house? Name your price so we can end this civilized." "Civilized?" I echoed incredulously. "You've been systematically deceiving me, cheating on me, and plotting to leave me financially compromised. And you want to talk about civilization?" "I was going to be fair," he insisted, a defensive edge to his voice. "You would have had enough to be comfortable. Enough, as determined by you. While you and Natalie enjoyed the fruits of 15 years of our shared life." I shook my head in disbelief. "You still don't get it, do you? This isn't just about money. It's about respect, honesty, the values we promised to uphold when we stood before our families and pledged to honor each other." Richard's facade cracked further, impatience bleeding through. "What good does this conversation do, Leah? It's over. I've moved on. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but dragging it out only makes things more painful for everyone, especially Lily." The casual dismissal of our marriage, of my pain, ignited something primal within me. "You don't get to invoke our daughter's name, not when you've been plotting to undermine her future, to strip away her security." "That's not fair," he snapped. "I would never hurt Lily. But you'd hurt me. You'd destroy the foundation of her family without a second thought." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I filed for divorce today, Richard, with an emergency motion to freeze all our assets pending full financial disclosure." The color drained from his face. "You what?" The hearing is tomorrow morning. Every account, every property, every investment will be scrutinized, including those you've tried to hide. He slammed his hand on the counter, mask fully dropped now. You had no right. Those accounts, those investments, I built them. Me. While you were playing house and planning charity luncheons. There it was. The truth he'd always hidden behind supportive smiles and perfunctory compliments. In his mind, my contributions to our marriage, to our family, had been worthless. Decorative at best. Playing house, I repeated softly. Is that what you think I've been doing for 15 years? Creating a home for our family? Raising our daughter? Supporting your career at every turn? Richard ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. I stood up, suddenly exhausted by his presence, by this conversation that was going exactly as I should have expected. There's nothing more to discuss tonight. I'll have Lily ready for you to see tomorrow afternoon, after the hearing. Where is she now? At a friend's. I didn't want her here for this conversation. He nodded, the first sensible reaction he'd shown. I'll get a hotel room for tonight. Have my lawyer call yours in the morning. As he turned to leave, I called after him. Richard, was any of it real? Us? This life we built? He paused at the door, shoulders slumping slightly. Parts of it, in the beginning. Then he was gone. The door closing with a soft click that somehow felt more final than if he'd slammed it. I sank back onto the kitchen stool, the weight of confirmation pressing down on me. I had tried the conventional approach. Confrontation, appeal to decency, attempt at rational discussion. It had failed spectacularly, revealing only what I should have already known. There would be no amicable separation, no fair division, no prioritizing of Lily's well-being over Richard's self-interest. My phone buzzed with a text from Megan. How did it go? I stared at the message, contemplating my response. How had it gone? Exactly as it needed to, perhaps. It had shown me beyond any doubt that Richard was not the man I had believed him to be. That there would be no reasoning. With him, no appeal to better angels. It had shown me that if I wanted justice, true justice, I would need to create it myself. It went as expected, I finally replied. See you in court tomorrow. Then I opened a new message to Bennett Fuller. Still interested in those cars? I need them moved tomorrow. Discretion essential. The die was cast. The time for conventional approaches was over. I barely slept that night, my mind racing with conflicting emotions. Anger at Richard's betrayal, fear for Lily's future, doubt about the path I was choosing. By dawn, I was sitting on our back patio, watching the sun rise over the carefully manicured garden, when my phone rang. Megan. I've just received a call from Richard's attorney, she said without preamble. They're requesting a postponement of today's hearing. My grip tightened on the phone. Why? They claim they need more time to prepare proper financial disclosures. It's a stalling tactic, Leah. He's trying to buy time to move more assets. A cold certainty settled in my chest. Can they do that? Get a postponement? They can try. I'll fight it, but judges often grant one initial continuance as a professional courtesy. Megan's voice took on a cautionary tone. There's something else. Richard's attorney mentioned serious concerns about Mrs. Mitchell's stability and judgment. They're laying groundwork to paint you as unstable. I nearly laughed at the audacity. I'm unstable? He's the one living a double life. I know, but this is a tactic we see often. If they can characterize you as emotionally reactive, it undermines your credibility when discussing financial matters. Megan paused. Did anything happen during your conversation last night that they could twist? I replayed the confrontation in my mind. Had I raised my voice? Yes. Shown emotion? Absolutely. But unstable? No, I was angry but in control. Good. But be prepared. This is going to get ugly. Richard's showing his hand early. He's going to fight dirty. After hanging up, I sat motionless, processing this new development. Richard wasn't just trying to hide assets. He was preparing to discredit me, to undermine my character. The man who had stood beside me at charity events, who had praised my organizational skills and social grace to his colleagues, was now plotting to paint me as unstable and irrational. My phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. You? Can't win this. Take what Richard offers and move on. N. Natalie. She had my phone number. Of course she did. She probably knew every detail of my life, had been watching from the shadows as I played the role of devoted wife, blissfully unaware of my husband's betrayal. I stared at the message, a curious calm settling over me. They were coordinating now, Richard and Natalie, strategizing together about how to handle me. The woman who had sent those photos. Had she done it to hurt me? To clear the path for their relationship? Or had it been a calculated move, designed to provoke an emotional reaction they could use against me? Either way, the message confirmed what I already knew. There would be no fair resolution through conventional channels. Richard would use every trick, every legal maneuver, every manipulation to protect his assets and his new life. My phone rang again, Bennett Fuller calling about the cars. I can have transport vehicles at your location by noon, he said. Are you sure about this, Leah? Once these cars leave your property? I'm sure, I replied, certainty hardening in my voice. How soon can you move them? I have buyers lined up for the Porsche and the Ferrari already. The Aston Martin will take longer. It's more specialized. But I can secure them all today and handle the sales transactions over the next week. He paused. You do have clear title to sell, right? That was the critical question. Legally, the cars were joint marital property. Once Megan's asset freeze went through, if it went through, I wouldn't be able to sell them without court approval. But until that happened, they're in both our names, I said carefully. I have all the documentation. Bennett's silence spoke volumes. He understood the precarious timing. Noon then. Make sure you have all the keys and paperwork ready. After hanging up, I moved with renewed purpose. I gathered the keys to all 6 vehicles, located their titles in Richard's desk, and compiled the service records he kept meticulously organized. Then I called Diana to check on Lily. She's fine, Diana assured me. The girls are still working on their project. How are you holding up? I considered the question. How was I holding up? Better than I would have expected. The shock and pain had given way to something else, a cold, clear determination. I'm doing what needs to be done. Want to talk about it? Not yet, but soon. Give Lily a hug for me. My next call was to Megan, bringing her up to speed on Natalie's text message. Save it, she advised. That's harassment. We can use it. There's something else, I said, taking a deep breath. I'm going to sell Richard's cars. Today. Silence stretched across the line. Leah, I strongly advise against that. Once the asset freeze is in place. That's just it. The hearing might be postponed. He's already moving to block me legally and discredit me personally. I need to act. Now. This could seriously compromise our position, Megan warned. The court doesn't look kindly on spouses liquidating assets before proceedings. I understand the risks, but these cars are worth over $1 million combined. If I don't move them now, they'll be tied up in legal battles for months, maybe years. Meanwhile, Richard will continue hiding money in accounts I don't even know exist. Megan sighed. As your attorney, I have to advise against this. But as a woman who's seen too many clients get financially destroyed in high-conflict divorces. She paused. Just be careful. And whatever you do, don't deposit the proceeds in any account Richard can access. The hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. I dressed with particular care, A conservative navy suit, minimal makeup, hair pulled back in a neat chignon. The image of stability and composure. In my briefcase were copies of all the financial documents I'd discovered, the emails about asset hiding and printouts of Natalie's photos and text message. The courthouse was imposing, all marble and echoing hallways. Megan met me at the entrance, her expression grave. Richard's attorney filed for continuance first thing this morning. Judge Harmon is reviewing it now. We were directed to a wood-paneled courtroom where Richard and his attorney, a sharp-featured man in an expensive suit, were already seated. Richard's eyes widened slightly at the sight of me, perhaps surprised by my composed appearance. He had expected hysteria, tears, the unstable woman he was preparing to describe to the court. Instead, he got ice. I took my seat beside Megan, back straight, eyes forward, refusing to acknowledge Richard's presence. The judge entered, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, and the proceedings began with Richard's attorney arguing for postponement. Your Honor, my client needs additional time to compile comprehensive financial disclosures. The petitioner has made sudden, unexpected claims that require thorough documentation to address properly. Megan countered forcefully, presenting evidence of Richard's hidden accounts and the emails discussing asset concealment. Your Honor, this is not a case where additional time will facilitate honest disclosure. It is a case where additional time will allow the respondent to further hide marital assets, as he has already been doing for months. Judge Harmon reviewed the documents carefully, her expression inscrutable. Finally, she looked up, gaze shifting between Richard and me. I'm denying the motion for continuance. The evidence presented suggests a pattern of financial concealment that warrants immediate intervention. I'm granting the emergency motion to freeze all assets pending full financial disclosure and discovery. Relief flooded through me, but it was short-lived. As the judge continued outlining the terms of the asset freeze, my phone vibrated with a text from Bennett. En route. ETA 20 minutes. The timing couldn't have been worse. The judge was literally ordering that no assets be moved or liquidated, while transport vehicles were heading to my house to remove 6 luxury cars. If they arrived after the order was officially filed. I leaned over to Megan and whispered, I need to make a call, urgent. She nodded slightly, then addressed the judge. Your Honor, may we request a brief recess? My client needs to check on her daughter. Judge Harmon acquiesced, calling a 15-minute recess. I hurried from the courtroom, dialing Bennett as soon as I reached the hallway. Where are you? I asked when he answered. About 10 minutes out. Is there a problem? The asset freeze is being ordered right now. If you arrive after it's filed, we'll be in violation. Bennett whistled low. That's cutting it close. What do you want to do? My mind raced, weighing options. If I called off the transport, the cars would remain at the house, locked in legal limbo. If I proceeded, I was potentially violating a court order. But if the cars were already gone before the order was officially filed and served? Proceed, I decided. But fast. Get them loaded and off the property as quickly as possible. On it. I returned to the courtroom just as the recess was ending, my heart hammering in my chest. Richard was watching me suspiciously, sensing something but unable to identify what. The judge resumed, finalizing the terms of the asset freeze and setting dates for financial disclosure and preliminary hearings. As we stood to leave, Richard approached, his attorney hovering nearby. This won't end well for you, he said quietly, for my ears only. I've built my career destroying opponents who underestimated me. What makes you think you'll fare any better? In that moment, looking into the cold, calculating eyes of the man I'd once loved, I experienced perfect clarity. This stranger, this man who could threaten the mother of his child with such casual cruelty, had never been worthy of my love, my loyalty, or my respect. The years I'd spent supporting him, believing in him, defending him to others, they hadn't been an investment in our future, but a tribute to an illusion. The difference, Richard, I replied, matching his quiet tone. Is that your opponents? Saw you coming. I walked away, leaving him frowning in confusion, and joined Megan outside the courtroom. The order has been granted, but it won't be officially filed for about an hour, she informed me. After that, it will need to be served to be fully binding. An hour. Bennett and his team should have the cars loaded and gone by then. I checked my watch, calculating. What happens now? Now the real work begins. Discovery, depositions, forensic accounting. It's going to be a long process, Leah. I nodded, mind already racing ahead to next steps. I need to get home. As Megan and I parted ways, my phone buzzed with a text from Bennett. 3 loaded. Working on the rest? Need to move faster. I drove home with a strange sense of exhilaration. For months, perhaps years, Richard had been meticulously calculating his exit, planning how to discard me while keeping the wealth we'd accumulated during our marriage. He had hidden accounts, purchased secret properties, and conspired with financial advisors to shield assets. But he had forgotten one crucial detail. I wasn't the decorative, compliant wife he'd convinced himself I was. I was the woman who had managed our household budget, organized our social calendar, and maintained relationships with every important contact in his network. I was the woman who had noticed when the gardener overcharged or the contractor cut corners. I was far more observant, far more capable than Richard had ever given me credit for. As I pulled into our driveway, I saw the transport vehicles, 3 car carriers loading the last of Richard's precious collection. Bennett waved from beside the Ferrari as it was carefully secured onto the ramp. Perfect timing, he called as I approached. Just finishing up. All documentation is in order. I watched as the last car, the Aston Martin Richard had called his legacy piece, was loaded. There was a certain poetic justice to it. The cars had always been his most visible status symbols, the possessions he'd lavished the most attention and care upon. Now they would be among the first assets liquidated in our divorce. What now? I asked Bennett as the transport vehicles prepared to depart. Now I sell them to my waiting buyers. The Ferrari and Porsche will be gone by tonight. The others, within days. I'll wire the proceeds to the account you specified. He studied my face. Are you sure about this, Leah? There's no going back. I thought of Richard's cold threat in the courthouse, of the calculated deception he'd maintained for years, of the future he'd been planning, a future that left me financially diminished while he enjoyed luxury with his younger girlfriend. I'm sure, I replied, watching as the car carriers pulled away, taking with them over $1 million of Richard's prized possessions. Some things can't be forgiven. As I turned to go back inside our soon-to-be former home, my phone rang. The courthouse. The asset freeze order had been officially filed. I smiled as I declined the call. Timing, as they say, is everything. I had approximately 3 hours before Richard would discover his cars were gone. 3 hours to prepare for the explosion that would inevitably follow. The first thing I did upon returning home was call Megan to confess what I'd done. You did... what? Her voice rose an octave. Leah, I explicitly advised against this. I know, and I'll take full responsibility. But I need your legal advice on how to handle the fallout. A heavy sigh came through the phone. The cars are already gone? Physically removed from the property? Yes. The transport left just minutes before the asset freeze was filed. And the proceeds? Being wired to a new account in my name only. One Richard doesn't know about. Another lengthy pause. This complicates things. Richard will file an emergency motion alleging contempt when he discovers the cars are gone. He'll argue that you knew the freeze was imminent and deliberately circumvented it. Which is true, I admitted. Yes, which is why I can't condone this action. However, from a strictly legal perspective, you could argue that at the time, you Arranged the sale? No order had been issued. It's a technical defense and it may not hold up, but it's something. Megan's professional tone shifted slightly. How much? For the cars? Bennett estimates around 2 million total, less his commission. A low whistle. That's substantial. It gives you operating capital outside of Richard's control, which is strategically valuable. But it also makes you a target. He's going to be furious, Leah, not just financially, but personally. Those cars were his pride and joy. I know. And that was precisely the point. The cars weren't just assets to Richard, they were extensions of his identity, physical manifestations of his success. Their loss would hurt him in a way that nothing else could, except perhaps the house. What's your next move? Megan asked. I'm bringing Lily home. Then I'm going to secure anything of sentimental or financial value that matters to me. Richard will retaliate, and I need to be prepared. Smart. Document everything in the house, too. Take photos, make inventories. If items start disappearing, we'll need evidence. After hanging up, I methodically went through the house, photographing valuable artwork, jewelry, electronics, anything Richard might target in revenge. I gathered my personal mementos, photo albums, my grandmother's. Jewelry, the architectural awards I'd won before setting aside my career to support Richard's. These went into a secure storage unit I'd rented the previous day. Next, I went through Lily's room, collecting her most treasured possessions, the stuffed rabbit she'd had since infancy, the science fair trophies she was so proud of, the memory box of ticket stubs and birthday cards she kept under her bed. These too went into protective storage. I wouldn't put it past Richard to use even Lily's belongings as leverage. My phone rang, Diana calling to check in. How did the hearing go? The freeze was granted, but there's been a development. I hesitated, then decided Diana deserved the full truth. I sold Richard's car collection, all 6 vehicles. The silence that followed was so complete I thought the call had dropped. Then Diana whispered, Holy shit, Leah, you actually did it? They're gone, being sold as we speak. He's going to lose his mind. Those cars were his babies. Diana's voice held equal parts awe and concern. What about the legal implications? I'm handling it, but I need a favor. Can you bring Lily home? And maybe stay with us tonight? I don't want to be alone when Richard finds out. Of course. We'll be there in 30 minutes. While waiting for them, I made one more critical call to a locksmith. Within an hour, every lock in the house had been changed, security codes reset, and a new monitoring service activated. Richard's key would no longer open the door to what had once been our shared home. The locksmith had just left when Diana arrived with Lily, whose face lit up at the sight of me. Mom, we finished our project and Ms. Henderson said it was the best in class. She launched into an excited description of their volcano experiment, blissfully unaware of the seismic shifts occurring in her family structure. Diana caught my eye over Lily's head, her expression asking silent questions. I gave a small nod. Yes, everything was proceeding as planned. Yes, I was holding it together. Sweetheart, I said when Lily paused for breath, there's something we need to talk about. Why don't we sit down? Diana took this as her cue to step into the kitchen, giving us privacy while remaining nearby for support. Is something wrong? Lily asked, her intuitive nature picking up on the shift in atmosphere. I took her hands in mine, choosing my words carefully. Your dad and I are going through some difficult changes. He's been making choices that affect our family, and as a result, we're not going to be living together anymore. Lily's eyes widened, then narrowed suspiciously. Are you getting divorced, like Emma's parents? I nodded, my heart breaking at the tremor in her voice. Yes, honey, we are. It's not something I wanted, but sometimes relationships between adults become broken in ways that can't be fixed. Is it because Dad works too much? Because he misses my stuff? The simplicity of her question made my throat tight. If only it had been that straightforward. It's more complicated than that. Your dad has been... I paused, unwilling to burden my daughter with the ugly truth of her father's betrayal. He's been making choices that aren't consistent with our marriage vows. But none of this is your fault, and we both love you very much. That will never change. Lily was silent for a long moment, processing. Then, with the directness only a 13-year-old could muster, "Did he cheat on you? Like Mr. Patterson did to Mrs. Patterson?" I stifled my surprise at her perception. "What makes you ask that?" She shrugged, suddenly looking older than her years. Emma's mom found out her dad was cheating when she saw texts on his phone. And Zoe's parents got divorced because her dad had a whole other family in Houston. She made air quotes around the phrase. "Is that what happened with Dad?" I took a deep breath, debating how honest to be. Lily deserved the truth, but a version appropriate for her age. "Yes. Your dad has been involved with someone else. I just found out recently." Lily's face flushed with anger. "That's why he kept missing my science competitions? Because he was with her?" The betrayal in her voice was palpable. "I don't know. Sweetheart, you'll have to ask him about that." "I don't want to talk to him," she declared, jumping up from the sofa. "I don't want to see him ever again." "Lily, he's still your father." "No, he lied to us. He..." Her voice broke, tears spilling down her cheeks. I pulled her into my arms, holding her as sobs shook her small frame. "I know it hurts," I murmured into her hair. "I know, but we're going to get through this together. You and me." After Lily had cried herself out, Diana helped get her settled with a movie in the den. I took the opportunity to check my email, a message from Bennett confirming that the Ferrari and Porsche had already been sold, with transfers initiated for the proceeds. The other cars would be sold within days. I forwarded the email to Megan so she would have all the details when Richard inevitably filed his motion. The afternoon passed in a strange limbo. Diana ordered pizza for dinner, which Lily picked at listlessly. We were halfway through a second movie, a comedy chosen specifically to lift Lily's spirits, when a car screeched into the driveway. The security system chimed, alerting us to movement on the front porch. Then came the pounding on the door. "Leah, open this door right now." Richard's voice, tight with barely controlled fury. Diana and I exchanged glances. "Stay with Lily," I instructed, moving toward the front door. Through the security monitor, I could see Richard on the porch, face flushed, fist raised to pound again. I pressed the intercom button. "What do you want, Richard?" "You know damn well what I want. Where are my cars? And why is my key not working?" "I had the locks changed for security reasons," I replied calmly. "As for the cars, they've been sold." The stunned silence that followed was almost comical. When Richard finally spoke, his voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You sold... my cars? All of them?" "Yes. The Ferrari and Porsche are already with their new owners. The others will be sold in the next few days." "You had no right." His voice rose again, echoing through the intercom. "Those were mine. You violated the court order." "Actually, I haven't. The cars were removed before the asset freeze was officially filed. And they weren't yours, Richard. They were marital property, purchased during our marriage with joint funds, just like this house." Richard's face contorted with rage. "I'm calling my lawyer right now. This is theft." "Go ahead. My attorney is fully informed. Now, if you'll excuse me, your daughter is upset enough without hearing you shouting on our porch." "I want to see Lily." "Not tonight. She knows about your affair, and she's processing a lot of difficult emotions. I'll have her call you tomorrow when she's ready." "You told her?" Richard's outrage was palpable. How dare you drag our daughter into this? The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I told her an age-appropriate version of the truth. If you're concerned about her feelings, perhaps you should have considered them before conducting an affair for 2 years. I paused, then added, or before missing her science competitions for vacations with your mistress. Richard's face drained of color. This isn't over, Leah. Not by a long shot. You've made a serious mistake. Goodbye, Richard. Have your lawyer contact Megan about scheduling time with Lily. I ended the intercom connection, turning to find Diana standing in the hallway, her expression a mixture of concern and admiration. You okay? I nodded, surprised to realize it was true. Actually, yes. Better than I expected. The confrontation had been unpleasant but clarifying. Richard's primary concern had been his cars. Not his daughter, not the dissolution of our marriage, but his material possessions. It only confirmed what I'd already known. I was making the right decision. He'll be back, Diana warned, with lawyers, probably police. I know, but I've done nothing illegal. The cars were sold before the order was filed, and this is still legally my residence. I glanced toward the den where Lily was curled up with a blanket, momentarily distracted by the movie. How much did she hear? Nothing. I turned up the volume when I heard his voice. Relief washed over me. Lily had experienced enough trauma without witnessing her father's rage. Thank you for everything. Diana squeezed my arm. That's what friends are for. Now, what's next in this master plan of yours? I smiled. The first genuine smile I'd felt in days. Now we prepare for phase 2. Which is? I glanced around at the house. The custom-built dream home Richard had insisted on, the showplace he used to impress colleagues and clients. The home that, like the cars, represented his success to the world. Let's just say Richard isn't the only one who knows how to make strategic investments. Morning came with a barrage of legal threats. Richard's attorney had filed an emergency motion alleging I had violated the asset freeze by selling the cars, demanding immediate financial sanctions and the return of the vehicles. Megan forwarded me the motion with a brief note. Expected this. Don't worry, we have our response ready. I was sipping coffee at the kitchen island, scrolling through the legal document on my tablet, when Lily appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, eyes puffy from crying. Morning, sweetheart, I said gently. How did you sleep? She shrugged, sliding onto a stool beside me. Not great. I had weird dreams. That's understandable. It's been a lot to process. I closed the tablet, giving her my full attention. What can I do to help? Lily traced patterns on the countertop with her finger, not meeting my eyes. Dad? Called me, a bunch of times, and texted. I stiffened. When? After I went to bed, I had my phone with me. She finally looked up, her expression a mixture of defiance and uncertainty. I didn't answer. I don't know what to say to him. Relief and concern warred within me. On one hand, I was grateful she hadn't been subjected to Richard's manipulation. On the other, I worried about the emotional weight she was carrying. You don't have to talk to him until you're ready, I assured her. But eventually, you'll need to. He's still your father, Lily. I know. Her voice was small. I'm just so mad at him. For lying. For hurting you. I placed my hand over hers. Your feelings are completely valid, and it's okay to be angry with him. Just remember that your relationship with your dad is separate from what happened between him and me. She nodded, though her expression remained troubled. Are we going to have to move? Will I have to change schools? The practical questions brought me back to the immediate challenges ahead. I don't know yet, sweetheart. A lot depends on how the divorce proceedings go. But whatever happens, I promise we'll make decisions together. Your well-being is my top priority. After breakfast, I drove Lily to school, promising Diana would pick her up if I was still in court. The emergency hearing on Richard's motion was scheduled for 11 a.m., and I needed to meet with Megan beforehand to prepare. Megan's office was a hive of activity when I arrived. Associates moved purposefully between conference rooms, arms laden with documents. In her private office, Megan greeted me with the focused intensity I was coming to appreciate. "Richard's team is pulling out all the stops," she said, gesturing to the stack of papers on her desk. "They've filed not just the emergency motion about the cars, but a separate motion questioning your fitness as Lily's primary custodian." My blood ran cold. On what grounds? "They're arguing that selling the cars demonstrates erratic financial behavior and disregard for court authority. That makes you an unsuitable guardian." Megan's expression was grim but determined. "It's a typical intimidation tactic, Leah, an attempt to pressure you into backing down on financial matters by threatening what matters most: your daughter." Rage flared, hot and bright. "He would use Lily as a bargaining chip?" "He's desperate. You've hit him where it hurts, his pride and his wallet. Now he's trying to hit back in the way he thinks will hurt you most." Megan leaned forward. "But we're prepared. We have evidence of his affair, his financial deception, his pattern of missing Lily's events. No judge is going to seriously entertain removing a child from her mother based on one financial transaction, especially given the circumstances." The reassurance helped calm me, but the fact that Richard would even attempt such a strategy reinforced my determination. Any lingering doubts about my course of action evaporated. This man, this stranger wearing my husband's face, deserved everything coming to him. The courtroom was tense when we arrived. Richard and his attorney sat at the opposing table, both in impeccable suits projecting an image of respectability and authority. Richard didn't look at me as I entered, keeping his gaze fixed on the papers before him. Judge Harmon presided again, her sharp eyes taking in both parties as the proceedings began. Richard's attorney went first, presenting a compelling narrative of a vindictive wife deliberately circumventing court orders, displaying concerning impulsivity and financial irresponsibility by liquidating valuable assets at below-market rates. "Furthermore, Your Honor," he continued smoothly, "Mrs. Mitchell's reckless actions suggest a concerning pattern of behavior that raises questions about her judgment in other areas, including parental decision-making." I felt my face flush with anger, but Megan's hand on my arm kept me composed. When our turn came, she approached the bench with confident poise. "Your Honor, let's be clear about the timeline here. My client arranged the sale of the vehicles before the asset freeze was ordered, and they were physically removed from the property before the order was filed. There was no violation." Megan paused, letting this sink in. "As for the allegations about Mrs. Mitchell's judgment, perhaps we should discuss Mr. Mitchell's judgment in conducting a 2-year affair while systematically hiding marital assets from his wife." She presented the emails we'd discovered on Richard's hidden laptop, detailing his asset concealment strategies. "These communications clearly demonstrate Mr. Mitchell's intent to defraud his wife financially. The vehicle sale was simply my client's effort to secure some financial protection before her husband could hide additional assets." The back and forth continued for nearly an hour, with Richard's attorney painting me as unstable and financially irresponsible, while Megan methodically dismantled their arguments with evidence of Richard's deception. Finally, Judge Harmon raised her hand, silencing both attorneys. "I've heard enough. Regarding the emergency motion on the vehicle sale, while I don't condone Mrs. Mitchell's actions, they technically occurred before the asset freeze was filed. Therefore, I'm denying the motion for sanctions or return of property." Richard's face darkened with anger as the judge continued. "However, Mrs. Mitchell, the proceeds from these sales are now subject to the asset freeze and must be accounted for in financial disclosures. You are not to dispose of or conceal these funds." Judge Harmon fixed me with a stern gaze. "Is that understood?" "Yes, Your Honor," I replied. As for the custody motion, I'm denying it as premature and insufficiently substantiated. Both parties are to maintain the status quo regarding their minor child until a formal custody hearing can be scheduled. The judge's expression softened slightly. I strongly encourage both of you to keep your daughter's emotional well-being at the forefront during these proceedings. Children suffer most when parents use them as pawns. With that, the hearing was adjourned. Megan turned to me with a satisfied smile. A clear win. The car sale stands and his custody play has been shut down. For now, at least. Relief washed over me. What happens to the money from the cars? It remains in your account, but is now officially part of the asset pool, to be divided in the divorce. You can't hide it or spend it frivolously, but having it in your control rather than Richard's is a significant advantage. Megan gathered her papers. This was just the first skirmish, Leah. Richard's going to keep coming at us hard. As we left the courtroom, Richard intercepted us in the hallway, his attorney hovering nearby. You think you're clever, don't you? He said, voice low and dangerous. Selling my cars out from under me before the order was filed. A cute legal maneuver. I met his gaze steadily. I learned from the best, Richard. How many assets have you hidden in offshore accounts while planning your exit strategy? His jaw tightened. You have no idea what you're up against. I've destroyed competitors who were far more formidable than you. I'm not your competitor, Richard. I'm the woman who knows all your weaknesses, all your vulnerabilities. I leaned closer, keeping my voice just between us. Did you really think I would just roll over and let you and Natalie walk away with everything we built? At the mention of Natalie's name, his expression flickered. Surprise and something else. Concern? Leave her out of this. Why? She didn't leave me out of it when she sent those photos, or when she texted me warning me to take what you offer and move on. I smiled coldly. Besides, I'm just getting started. Megan gently guided me away before Richard could respond, steering me toward the elevator. Don't antagonize him unnecessarily, she warned. It might feel satisfying in the moment, but it could complicate things. But the confrontation had energized rather than drained me. For 15 years, I had been the supportive wife, the diplomatic, one who smoothed Richard's path and managed his domestic life. Now I was standing my ground, refusing to be bulldozed by his intimidation tactics. It felt like reclaiming a part of myself I hadn't even realized was missing. That energy carried me through the afternoon as I met with Patrick Donovan, the real estate agent I'd contacted earlier. Patrick had been a fixture in the Austin luxury home market for decades and had actually helped us purchase our current house. The market's hot right now, he confirmed as we sat in his sleek downtown office. Properties in your neighborhood are moving within days of listing, often above asking price. And if I wanted to list quietly, without my husband's knowledge? Patrick's eyebrows rose slightly. Legally, you'd need his signature on the sale documents eventually, but we could prepare everything in advance, market it discreetly, even secure a buyer, all before the listing becomes public. This was exactly what I needed to hear. And the value? Last appraisal put it at $8 million. That was what, 2 years ago? With the improvements you've made and current market conditions, we're looking at 4, 5, possibly $5 million. Patrick leaned forward, lowering his voice. Leah, I can't help but notice this is unusual. Are you and Richard divorcing? Yes, it's complicated, but I assure you I'm acting within my legal rights. This wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. While I couldn't sell the house without Richard's signature, I could certainly prepare everything up to that point. Patrick nodded, professional discretion taking over. I understand. Let me show you what a discreet marketing strategy might look like. For the next hour, we discussed potential listing prices, marketing approaches, and timeline. By the time I left his office, we had a plan in place, a pocket listing that would be quietly marketed to select clients while all paperwork was prepared, allowing for an extremely rapid sale when the time came. That evening, as Lily and I sat at the dinner table, my phone buzzed with a text from Bennett. All cars sold. Total proceeds, $127 million after commission. Funds transferred to your account as instructed. I set down my phone, a wave of satisfaction washing over me. Phase 1 complete. Mom? Lily's voice pulled me back to the present. You look different. Different how? She tilted her head, studying me. I don't know. Stronger, maybe? Like when you present your designs to difficult clients. The observation was startlingly perceptive. I did feel stronger, more focused, more determined, more in control of my own destiny than I had in years. The path ahead would be challenging, filled with legal battles and emotional hurdles. Richard would continue to fight dirty, using every resource at his disposal. But for the first time since Natalie's devastating email had upended my world, I wasn't afraid. I was prepared. And I was discovering a resilience within myself that had been dormant for too long. I am stronger, I told Lily, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. We both are. And we're going to get through this together. As she smiled back at me, I felt the last pieces of my plan clicking into place. Richard had taught me an invaluable lesson with his betrayal. In war, the victor is not always the strongest combatant, but the one who seizes the strategic advantage. He had underestimated me, dismissed me as just a wife, just a mother, someone who could be easily manipulated and discarded when convenient. It would be the last mistake he ever made in our marriage. The days following the emergency hearing fell into an uneasy rhythm. Richard, through his attorney, demanded a visitation schedule with Lily, who reluctantly agreed to meet him for dinner. I watched her leave for that first meeting with a knot in my stomach, relieved when she returned, subdued but intact. He kept saying it wasn't what I thought, she reported, curled up on the sofa beside me. That grown-up relationships are complicated, and that I shouldn't blame him for the marriage ending. My fingers tightened around my teacup. What did you say to that? Lily shrugged, playing with the fringe on a throw pillow. I asked him if he loved her, the other woman. He said it wasn't about love, it was about compatibility and shared life goals. Whatever that means. She looked up at me, her eyes too wise for her 13 years. He didn't even say he was sorry, Mom. Not really. Just that he was sorry. Things got messy. I swallowed my anger, determined not to color Lily's perception more than Richard's own actions already had. Your father has always struggled with admitting when he's wrong, I said carefully. But that doesn't mean he doesn't love you. I know, she sighed. He wants me to come stay at his condo next weekend. He said we could redecorate my room there however I want. Her expression grew troubled. Is that okay? If I go? Of course. It's okay. That's your time with your dad. I hugged her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. This divorce is between your father and me. You're allowed to love us both. While managing Lily's emotional needs, I was also laying the groundwork for the next phase of my plan. Patrick had quietly showcased our house to select potential buyers, and interest was high. 2 serious offers had already come in, both above the target price of $8 million. Meanwhile, Bennett had completed the sale of all 6 cars, with the proceeds securely in my separate account. As required by the court, I had documented every transaction for eventual division in the divorce settlement, but having control of those funds gave me crucial leverage. Richard, predictably, was furious about the cars but attempting to project confidence. His attorney had filed extensive financial disclosures that I knew were incomplete, conveniently omitting the offshore accounts and property holdings we'd discovered on his secret laptop. Megan was methodically building our case, preparing to expose these omissions at the perfect strategic moment. The real estate preparations remained my secret weapon. while Richard believed I was simply digging in for a protracted legal battle. I was actually preparing to strike at the heart of his public identity, our showcase home. 10 days after the emergency hearing, everything aligned perfectly. Patrick called with news of a buyer willing to pay $2 million in cash for an expedited closing. They're motivated to move quickly, he explained. Foreign diplomat being transferred to Austin. They're prepared to close in 2 weeks if we can fast-track the paperwork. Any contingencies? I asked, already running calculations in my head. Just a standard inspection, which I'm confident won't be an issue given your home's condition. They're even willing to let you rent back for 60 days post-closing if needed for your transition. This was better than I'd dared hope. Not only a price substantially above market value, but a buyer willing to accommodate a rent-back arrangement that would give Lily and me time to find our next home. There was just one significant obstacle. Richard's signature would eventually be required on the sale documents. That evening, after Lily had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen island with a glass of wine, contemplating my next move. The house had always been Richard's pride and joy, the physical manifestation of his success, the backdrop for his carefully cultivated image as a financial titan. Selling it would wound him deeply, perhaps even more than losing his cars. But, unlike the cars, I couldn't simply move the house before the court order took effect. I needed a different strategy. My phone rang, Diana checking in, as she did most evenings now. "How are my favorite fighters doing?" she asked. "Hanging in there. Lily's processing, and I paused, considering how much to share. Diana had been my rock through this ordeal, but what I was contemplating now ventured into murky ethical territory. "I'm planning something that might cross a line." "What kind of line?" Diana's voice sharpened with interest. "I have a buyer for the house. Excellent offer, fast closing, but I need Richard's signature." "And you think he'll refuse?" "I know he'll refuse. The house is his trophy, his status symbol. He'd rather let it sit empty than sell it and split the proceeds with me." I took a deep breath. But there might be a way to force his hand. Diana was quiet for a moment. "I'm listening." "Richard hid a lot from me, but I know one thing for certain. His business depends entirely on his reputation, his clients' trust, him with millions because they believe he's smart, strategic, and above all, in control." "Makes sense," Diana agreed. So what if that carefully managed image were threatened? What if his colleagues and clients started questioning his judgment? I ran my finger around the rim of my wine glass. What if, for instance, they learned about his affair with a woman half his age, or his hidden properties, or the offshore accounts he's using to conceal assets in his divorce? "Leah," Diana's voice carried a warning note, "are you talking about blackmailing your husband?" "Not blackmail. Leverage." The distinction felt important, even if only to me. I won't threaten to expose him directly. I'll simply help him understand that his choices have left him vulnerable in ways he hasn't fully considered. Diana sighed. "It's a risky play. If it backfires, it could make things worse for you and Lily." "I know, but Richard has forced my hand. He's already trying to limit my access to funds while he continues hiding assets. If I don't act decisively now, he'll drag this out for years, draining resources that should be securing Lily's future." After finishing with Diana, I outlined my approach, crafting each element meticulously. This wasn't about revenge anymore, although the satisfaction of outmaneuvering Richard would certainly be sweet. This was about securing the financial foundation Lily and I would need to rebuild our lives. The following morning, I contacted Patrick to prepare all the necessary paperwork for the house sale. Then I called Megan, informing her of a slight change in strategy. She was skeptical, but agreed to follow my lead, trusting that I understood Richard better than anyone. Finally, I sent Richard a text. "Need to discuss something important regarding Lily. Dinner tomorrow? just the two of us. His reply came quickly. Fine. Vermilion at 7. Vermilion was one of Austin's most exclusive restaurants, a place where Richard could regularly be seen entertaining important clients. Its selection was deliberate, I knew. He wanted to be on his territory, in an environment where he felt powerful and in control. Perfect. I spent the next day preparing meticulously. I selected my outfit with strategic care, a sleek black dress that conveyed both elegance and authority, paired with the diamond earrings Richard had given me for our 10th anniversary. My hair and makeup were flawless, projecting confidence and composure. I wanted to look like someone worthy of respect, not a wronged wife seeking sympathy. When I arrived at Vermilion, Richard was already seated at his usual table, centrally, located where he could see and be seen by Austin's business elite. He stood as I approached, his expression guarded but curious. "You look well," he offered as I took my seat, a waiter immediately appearing to take my drink order. "Thank you." I smiled politely, scanning the room. As expected, several faces I recognized from Richard's business circle were dining at nearby tables. "How have you been?" "Busy. Between work and setting up the new place for Lily's visits, there's barely time to breathe." He studied me, trying to gauge my mood. "You said this was about Lily?" "Indirectly." I paused as the waiter delivered my wine. "It's about our future, all of us." Richard's eyes narrowed slightly. "I'm listening." "I've been doing a lot of thinking about how to move forward in a way that minimizes damage. To Lily, to our finances, to your reputation." "My reputation." His tone sharpened. I nodded, taking a deliberate sip of wine. "It's a small world, Richard. Austin's business community even smaller. People talk." His posture stiffened. "Are you threatening me?" "Not at all. I'm simply acknowledging reality." I leaned forward slightly. "Right now, only a handful of people know about your affair with Natalie, about the offshore accounts, about the property in Miami. Your partners, your clients. They still see Richard. Mitchell, financial genius, family man." The color drained slightly from his face. "What exactly are you proposing? A clean break, no prolonged court battle, no messy public exposure." I placed a folder on the table between us. "I've had an offer on the house. 2 million cash, fast closing. We split the proceeds equally, just as we'll split the money from the cars. You keep your offshore accounts, yes, all of them, and I keep my design business and the downtown condo in your name." Richard stared at the folder, but didn't touch it. "And if I refuse?" "Then we continue on our current path. The forensic accountants Megan has engaged continue their investigation. The depositions proceed, with Natalie receiving her subpoena next week. Your hidden assets become part of the public record as the case progresses." I shrugged lightly. "Life goes on, but with significantly more public scrutiny of your financial practices and personal choices." His jaw tightened, fingers drumming, lightly on the table. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I pulled out my phone, scrolling to a series of photos before sliding it across the table. "These were taken last week. You and Natalie at the downtown condo, you at the Miami property, documentation of the Cayman accounts, emails between you and your financial advisor discussing how to shield assets from divorce proceedings." Richard's face darkened as he flipped through the images. "How did you—" "Does it matter? What matters is that I have them. And while I have no desire to use them, I will do whatever necessary to ensure Lily's future is secure." I reclaimed my phone. "All I'm asking is that we settle this quickly and fairly. Sign the paperwork for the house sale. Agree to the equitable division of assets I've outlined. Then we both move forward with our lives." A lengthy silence followed as Richard calculated his options, his expression shifting from anger to resignation. He was a strategist at heart, and he recognized when he'd been outmaneuvered. "You've changed," he finally said, something like grudging respect in his voice. "No," I corrected him. "I've always been this capable. You just never noticed." Another long pause. Then, "I'll review the proposal with my attorney." "Of course. But the house offer expires in 48 hours. The buyers are motivated, but they have other options." I stood, gathering my purse. "Think of it as a business decision, Richard. Cut your losses and preserve what matters most. Your reputation, your relationship with Lily, your future with Natalie if that's what you want." As I turned to leave, Richard caught my wrist. "Wait, why are you doing this? Why not drag me through court, make me pay for everything?" I looked down at him. This man I had once loved so completely, now a stranger wearing a familiar face. "Because it's not about making you pay, Richard. It's about claiming what's rightfully mine and Lily's. It's about efficiency, and it's about showing our daughter that even when people hurt us, we can respond with strength rather than vindictiveness." I gently removed my wrist from his grasp. "You have 48 hours. I suggest you use them wisely." As I walked through the restaurant head high, I felt the weight of the past weeks, the betrayal, the hurt, the fear, begin to lift. I had taken control of my narrative, confronted my betrayer on my own terms, and presented a solution that served my interests while appealing to his pragmatism. Whether Richard accepted my terms remained to be seen. But for the first time since opening that fateful email with Natalie's vacation photos, I felt completely certain of one thing. Whatever happened next, I would face it not as Richard's victim, but as the architect of my own future. My phone buzzed as I reached my car, a text from Patrick. "Second buyer just came in. $5, $4 million, same terms. How do you want to proceed?" I smiled, sliding into the driver's seat. "Hold them as backup. Give Richard 48 hours to sign original offer. If he balks, we go with new buyer." The pieces were falling into place. Phase 2 was officially in motion. The following morning dawned bright and clear, a perfect Austin spring day that seemed at odds with the tension humming through my body. I'd slept surprisingly well after my confrontation with Richard, a deep, dreamless sleep born of emotional exhaustion and, perhaps, a newfound peace. I had done everything in my power to secure a fair outcome for Lily and myself. Now it was Richard's move. Lily was spending the day with Diana and her daughter, giving me space to handle whatever came next. I was nursing my second cup of coffee when my phone rang. "Megan." "Richard's attorney just called," she said without preamble. "They want a meeting. Today." My pulse quickened. "Did he say why?" "Only that Richard has reviewed your proposal and wants to discuss terms." Megan's voice held a note of cautious optimism. "This is good, Leah. He's engaging rather than dismissing. Outright." We arranged to meet at Megan's office at noon. I spent the intervening hours reviewing the house sale documents one final time, ensuring everything was in order for Richard's signature if he agreed to my terms. Patrick had already prepared all the necessary paperwork, and the buyers were standing by, eager to proceed. At precisely noon, I walked into the conference room at Megan's firm to find Richard and his attorney, David Keller, already seated. Richard looked tired, the confident facade of last night somewhat diminished in the harsh fluorescent lighting. Our eyes met briefly before he looked away, his expression unreadable. "Thank you for meeting on such short notice," Megan began, ever professional. "I understand Mr. Mitchell has considered my client's proposal and wishes to discuss terms." David nodded, glancing at Richard before responding. "That's correct. After reviewing the proposal, my client is willing to consider an expedited resolution under certain conditions." The negotiations that followed were intense, but surprisingly productive. Richard agreed to the house sale in principle, but wanted specific assurances that I would destroy all copies of the incriminating photos after settlement, that the divorce filing would cite irreconcilable differences with no mention of infidelity, and that neither party would disparage the other to business associates or social contacts. In return, he offered a concession I hadn't expected. He would disclose the offshore accounts and include them in the asset division if I agreed to keep their existence confidential from his business partners. These accounts were established for tax planning purposes, David explained carefully. Legal, but sensitive. Megan and I exchanged glances. This was a significant shift, Richard essentially admitting to the financial deception while offering to make it right. I'll need to see complete documentation of all accounts before agreeing to anything, I said firmly. Full disclosure, full valuation. Richard nodded, a flicker of what might have been respect crossing his features. You'll have it by end of day. After 2 hours of negotiation, we reached a framework agreement that felt surprisingly equitable. The house would be sold with proceeds split equally. The car sale proceeds would likewise be divided. Richard would disclose all hidden assets for equal division, and we would share custody of Lily with a schedule that respected her academic and social needs. I'll have the revised agreement drawn up immediately, Megan said as the meeting concluded. If everything is in order, we could have signatures tomorrow and file for an uncontested divorce. As we prepared to leave, Richard asked for a moment, alone with me. Megan raised an eyebrow in question and I nodded reassurance. 5 minutes, she said to Richard, before stepping out with David. When the door closed behind them, Richard and I regarded each other across the conference table. For a moment, neither of us spoke. It was strange, being alone with this man who had once been the center of my world, now essentially a business adversary. Why didn't you go public? He finally asked. With the photos, the accounts, everything. You could have destroyed me. The question surprised me, though perhaps it shouldn't have. Richard had always operated from a position of calculated advantage, using others' weaknesses against them. The concept of restraint for reasons beyond strategic benefit was foreign to him. Would that have benefited Lily? I asked simply. Would it have made her life better to see her father publicly humiliated, his reputation in tatters? He looked away, discomfort evident in the set of his shoulders. You could have taken everything. The cars, the house, all of it. The courts would have sided with you given the circumstances. That was never my goal, Richard. I wanted what was fair, for Lily and for me. Recognition of my contributions to our marriage, my role in building, the life you so easily discarded. I studied him, this stranger I had once loved so completely. Besides, taking everything wouldn't have filled the hole your betrayal left. It wouldn't have given meaning to 15 years of partnership that meant nothing to you. Richard's expression tightened. That's not fair. Those years weren't meaningless to me. Weren't they? You spent at least 2 of them systematically, planning your exit, hiding assets, building a relationship with another woman, creating a parallel life while I remained oblivious. The words held no bitterness now, just a calm statement of fact. You didn't even have the courage to end our marriage honestly. He had no response to that, at least none he was willing to voice. After a moment, he simply nodded. I'll sign the house papers tomorrow, and I'll make sure Natalie understands she's to have no further contact with you. Thank you. I stood, gathering my belongings. For what it's worth, Richard, I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for with her. Or if not with her, then somewhere. His eyes met mine, a fleeting vulnerability visible before his usual mask slipped back into place. Same to you, Leah. With that, our marriage effectively ended, not with dramatic accusations or courtroom theatrics, but with a business-like agreement and surprisingly civil parting. The next 24 hours passed in a whirlwind of activity. Richard's attorney provided documentation of the offshore accounts as promised, revealing assets worth approximately $2 million, substantially more than I had suspected. Megan's team rapidly incorporated these into our settlement agreement, maintaining the principle of equal division. The following morning, Richard arrived at Megan's office to sign the house sale documents and finalize divorce agreement. The proceedings were brief and oddly anticlimactic. 15 years of marriage concluded with a few signatures and handshakes. "We'll file these immediately," Megan told me after Richard had left. Given the uncontested nature and the comprehensive settlement, the divorce should be finalized within 90 days. I nodded, feeling a complex mixture of emotions: relief, sadness, and a strange sense of accomplishment. "What about the house sale?" "Patrick is submitting the paperwork to the buyers today. The inspection is scheduled for tomorrow, and if all goes well, we're looking at closing in 2 weeks as planned." That evening, I sat with Lily on our back patio, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. She had taken the news of our agreement with surprising maturity, asking practical questions about the custody arrangement and where we would live after selling the house. "So it's really happening," she said, her legs tucked underneath her on the outdoor sofa. "You and Dad are getting divorced." "Yes, sweetheart. But we're both committed to making this transition as smooth as possible for you." I squeezed her hand gently. "And remember, this doesn't change how either of us feels about you. We both love you more than anything." She nodded, processing. "Are you sad about the divorce?" The question gave me pause. Was I sad? Certainly. I felt grief for the loss of the future I had once envisioned, for the partnership I had believed in. But that grief was for something that had never truly existed, a relationship built on my commitment and Richard's convenience. "I'm sad that our family is changing in ways I never expected," I answered honestly. "But I'm also relieved to be moving forward with clarity instead of living in illusion." Lily considered this, her expression thoughtful beyond her years. "Will we be okay, financially and stuff?" "We will," I assured her. "The settlement is fair. We'll have plenty to buy a new home, cover college costs, everything we need." I smiled, seeing an opportunity to share an important lesson. "And I'm going back to work, restarting my architectural firm. It's time I reclaimed that part of myself." Her eyes widened with interest. "Really? That's awesome, Mom. Can I help? Maybe in the summer?" "I'd love that." The thought of sharing my passion for design with Lily, of modeling professional independence for her, filled me with unexpected joy. Maybe we can design our new house together. The house sale progressed rapidly, just as Patrick had promised. The inspection revealed only minor issues, quickly addressed, and the closing was scheduled for exactly 2 weeks after Richard and I signed the paperwork. The buyers, thrilled with the property, had already begun planning their move-in, while Lily and I started the bittersweet process of deciding what to keep and what to leave behind. "I'm not sure I even want anything from this place," I admitted to Diana as we sorted through the kitchen items. So much of it was selected to maintain Richard's image rather than because I loved it. Diana nodded understandingly, wrapping a crystal wine glass in tissue paper. "So start fresh. Keep only what genuinely matters to you and Lily. Let the rest go with the house." This approach felt right, liberating even. I found myself keeping very little. Family photos, Lily's artwork, and mementos, a few pieces of furniture with sentimental value, and my personal items. The rest, the carefully curated interior that had been designed to impress Richard's colleagues and clients, would stay, included in the sale as fully furnished at the buyer's request. A week before closing, I received an unexpected email from Natalie. My finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity won out. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from," it began, "but I need to apologize. Sending those photos was cruel and unnecessary. I told myself I was doing it because you deserved to know the truth. But really, I was just angry that Richard kept putting off telling you about us." The email continued, detailing how Richard had promised for months to end our marriage, always, finding reasons to delay. How he had presented their relationship as something fleeting at first, then as something serious but complicated by his obligations. How she had eventually realized she was just another aspect of Richard's life being managed and controlled for his convenience. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she concluded. "But I wanted you to know that I admire how you've handled everything. Richard expected you to fall apart, to become the emotional ex-wife he could easily dismiss. Instead, you outmaneuvered him at every turn. It's made me reconsider a lot of things about my own choices and what I'm willing to accept in relationships." I sat with the email for a long time, surprised by the complexity of my reaction. There was no joy in learning that Natalie, too, had been manipulated by Richard, no satisfaction in her apparent regrets. Just a weary recognition of Richard's pattern, using people as long as they served his purposes, discarding them when they became inconvenient or demanded too much authenticity. I never responded to Natalie's email. Some chapters were better left closed. The day of closing arrived with a sense of finality and new beginnings. Lily and I had already moved into a temporary apartment while we searched for our new home, a process we were approaching with excitement rather than stress. The closing itself was handled by our respective attorneys, with neither Richard nor I needing to be present. As the final documents were signed and funds transferred, Megan called, "With confirmation, it's done. The house is sold, and your portion of the proceeds, $26 million, has been deposited into your account." I thanked her, a weight lifting that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. The house had been beautiful, yes, but also a symbol of my sublimated identity, a showcase for Richard's success rather than a true home that reflected my own values and aesthetics. That evening, Lily and I celebrated with pizza in our apartment, sitting cross-legged on the floor because our dining table hadn't yet been delivered. "This is weird," Lily giggled, gesturing around at our relatively sparse surroundings. "But kind of fun too, like camping." "Exactly like camping," I agreed, except with indoor plumbing and pizza delivery. She grew thoughtful, picking pepperoni off her slice. "Mom, are you going to date someone else eventually?" The question caught me off guard. I haven't really thought about it. Right now, I'm focused on getting us settled and restarting my firm. But someday, maybe? I considered the question seriously, recognizing its importance to her. Someday, maybe, if I meet someone who genuinely adds value to our lives. But I'm not in any rush, sweetheart. I'm learning to appreciate my own company again. Lily nodded, seemingly satisfied. Good, because you deserve someone way better than Dad. The simple statement, delivered with a teenager's matter-of-fact certainty, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Thank you, Lily. For what? For being you. For adapting to all these changes with such grace. For seeing things so clearly. I reached over to squeeze her hand. I couldn't have gotten through this without you. She rolled her eyes, but her smile was genuine. Duh. We're a team, Mom. 2 days later, I signed the lease on a commercial space for my revived architectural firm. It was a beautiful storefront in a vibrant area of Austin, with large windows, that flooded the space with natural light, perfect for the creative work I'd set aside for too long. As I stood in the empty space, visualizing how it would look with drafting tables and design samples, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Patrick, with a simple message and an attachment. Thought you might appreciate this. Congratulations on everything. The attachment was a photo of the sold sign in front of what had once been my home, now belonging to someone else. I studied it for a moment, expecting to feel some pang of loss or regret. Instead, I felt only a quiet satisfaction, not in taking something from Richard, but in reclaiming myself. I had entered my marriage as a promising young architect with dreams and ambitions of my own. Somewhere along the way, I had allowed those dreams to be overshadowed by Richard's career, his needs, his image. The woman who had received those devastating vacation photos 3 months ago had been a shadow of herself, financially dependent, emotionally diminished, identity subsumed. But that woman was gone now. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who had faced betrayal and emerged not just intact but enhanced, someone who had remembered her own worth and reclaimed her power. As I turned away from the windows of my new office space, I deleted the photo of the sold sign without saving it. The house, like the cars and the marriage itself, belonged to the past. My focus now was firmly on the future, a future I was building on my own terms, brick by deliberate brick. And for the first time in years, I couldn't wait to see what came next. 6 months later, I stood in the center of my newly completed home, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that faced a small but lush backyard. The house was nothing like the ostentatious mansion Richard and I had shared. It was modern, efficient, and designed entirely to my own specifications. Most importantly, every inch of it reflected my aesthetic vision rather than someone else's idea of status and success. "Mom, come see my bathroom. The tile is finally finished." Lily called from upstairs, her excitement echoing through the still empty rooms. I climbed the open-tread staircase, running my hand along the smooth wooden railing that a local artisan had crafted specifically for this space. Lily stood in the doorway of her bathroom, beaming with pride. The tile she had selected, a mosaic, of blues and greens that resembled ocean waves, covered the shower walls, transforming the space into something magical. "It's perfect," I told her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Exactly how you imagined it." "We did good, didn't we?" Lily leaned against me, surveying our creation with satisfaction. "The whole house came out awesome." She was right. The home we had designed together over the past months was everything I had hoped for, not just physically beautiful, but representative of our journey. Lily had been involved in every decision, from the overall layout to the smallest finishes. The process had been healing for both of us, a tangible way to build our new life together. "Moving day is still set for Saturday?" she asked, already planning which friends she would invite to see her new room. I nodded. "The movers are confirmed, and the furniture for the main rooms will be delivered Friday." We had purchased only what we truly needed and loved, leaving behind the extravagant accumulation that had characterized our previous home. Later that afternoon, as we drove back to our temporary apartment, Lily's phone chimed with a text from Richard. Their relationship had stabilized into something cautiously cordial over the past months. The custody schedule we'd established was working well, with Lily spending alternate weekends and one dinner each week with her father. "Dad wants to know if he can come see the new house after we move in," she reported, looking to me for guidance. I considered the request. There had been a time when the thought of Richard in my new space would have felt like an invasion, a contamination of the fresh start we'd created. But that raw sensitivity had faded, replaced by a more measured perspective. "If you'd like to show him, that's fine," I told her. "It's your home, too." Lily smiled, relieved. "Cool. I want him to see my bathroom and the study we designed." She typed a response, then hesitated. "Is it weird that I still want him to be proud of me, even after everything?" "Not weird at all," I assured her, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "He's your dad. That relationship exists separately from what happened between him and me." This was perhaps the most important lesson I'd worked to convey throughout our transition, that Lily's relationship with her father was her own, not a referendum on his failings as a husband. It hadn't been easy, especially in the early days, when my own pain was still so fresh. But watching her navigate this complex emotional terrain with increasing confidence vindicated the effort. At the apartment, I found an email from Megan confirming that the divorce was now officially final, the last administrative details completed. Though we had been functionally divorced for months, the formal documentation marked the true end of an era. I sat with the news, searching myself for residual grief or anger, but found only a quiet acceptance. The woman who had built her identity around being Richard Mitchell's wife no longer existed. In her place stood Leah Rocks, architect, mother, and sole proprietor of Rocks Design Group, which had quickly gained momentum in Austin's competitive market. The commercial space I'd leased had been transformed into a sleek studio where I now employed 2 junior designers and an office manager. We had already secured several significant projects, including a boutique hotel renovation that had garnered attention in design circles. Most satisfying was the nature of my client relationships. Unlike Richard, who had cultivated business connections based on power dynamics and mutual advantage, I was building a reputation for collaborative partnerships and ethical practices. My clients chose me for my vision and integrity, not because I projected an image of infallibility or dominance. The following morning, I arrived at the studio early to prepare for a presentation to potential investors for an eco-friendly apartment complex. Shannon, my office manager, greeted me with coffee and an update on the morning's schedule. The investors will be here at 10, and Diana called. She wants to know if you're still on for dinner tonight. Shannon handed me a folder containing the finalized presentation materials. Also, that journalist from Architectural Digest emailed, again about featuring your residential renovation in their New Voices section. I thanked her, taking a moment to appreciate how thoroughly my professional life had transformed. 6 months ago, I had been defining myself through Richard's career, planning charity events that would enhance his business network. Now I was pursuing my own vision, receiving recognition for my own achievements. The investor meeting went exceptionally well. My presentation on sustainable design principles resonated with the group's commitment to environmentally responsible development, and they approved the initial concept sketches with enthusiasm. As we concluded, the lead investor, a woman in her 50s with a reputation for backing innovative projects, lingered to speak with me privately. "I'm impressed, Leah," she said, gathering her papers. "Not just with the design, though that's exceptional, but with how quickly you've established yourself. It's not easy to build something from scratch in this industry." I smiled, acknowledging the comment. "Thank you. It's been an intense learning curve, but deeply satisfying." She studied me for a moment, seeming to consider something. "I hope you don't mind my saying this, but I knew your ex-husband professionally. We served on a philanthropic board together." My pulse quickened slightly, though not with the anxiety such connections would have once provoked. "Oh?" "Yes. And I have to tell you, the way you've handled the transition from being Richard Mitchell's wife to establishing your own identity has been noteworthy." She closed her portfolio with a decisive snap. "There were rumors, of course. There always are in circles like ours. But you never engaged in public recriminations or attempts to damage his standing, despite having every justification." I wasn't sure how to respond. While I had indeed refrained from publicly exposing Richard's betrayal, it had been primarily for Lily's sake, not out of any lingering loyalty to him. "That restraint speaks to your character," she continued. "And it makes me all the more confident. In our partnership, I value integrity as much as talent." After she left, I sat in the quiet conference room, reflecting on her words. The path I had chosen, seeking justice through strategic action rather than public destruction, had been right for me and for Lily. It had allowed us to move forward with dignity rather than being defined by victimhood or vindictiveness. That evening, Diana and I met for dinner at a small restaurant near my new home. 6 months into her own separation from her husband, a decision catalyzed in part by watching my journey, she was navigating the early stages of rebuilding. "How do you do it?" she asked, twirling pasta around her fork. "You seem so complete." "I still feel like I'm missing pieces of myself." I considered the question carefully. I think the difference is that I was forced to confront everything at once. The betrayal, the financial deception, the complete collapse of the life I thought I had. There was no gradual adjustment, no gentle transition, just before and after with a clear line between. Diana nodded, understanding. The vacation photos. Exactly. In a strange way, Natalie did me a favor. The shock was devastating, but it was also clarifying. I couldn't cling to illusions or half measures. I took a sip of wine, organizing my thoughts. And then, facing Richard's attempts to control the divorce process, watching him try to hide assets, limit my options, even challenge my fitness as a parent, it showed me exactly who he was. Who he had always been beneath the charm and success. A manipulative narcissist? Diana suggested. I laughed softly. I try not to diagnose, but someone who viewed relationships as transactions, certainly. Someone who valued control above connection. I set down my glass, meeting her gaze directly. The real turning point wasn't selling his cars or even the house. It was recognizing that I had allowed myself to become a supporting character in my own life. Diana's expression turned thoughtful. That's what scares me most. Looking back and realizing how much of myself I surrendered without even noticing. It happens incrementally, I acknowledged. Small compromises that seem reasonable in isolation. Priorities that shift so gradually you don't register the change. Until one day, you're living someone else's version of your life. And how do you reclaim yourself? Where do you even start? It was the question I had wrestled with continuously over the past months, not just in rebuilding my career and creating a new home, but in the quiet moments of self-reflection that punctuated this journey. You start by listening to yourself, I told her. Really listening to the whispers of discomfort and longing that you've been ignoring. You pay attention to what energizes you versus what depletes you. You experiment, try new things, rediscover old passions. I smiled, remembering my own tentative steps back into design work. And you forgive yourself for the detours. They're part of the journey, too. Diana reached across the table, squeezing my hand gratefully. Thank you. For blazing this trail. For showing it can be done. The night before our scheduled move into the new house, Lily and I conducted a final walkthrough, making notes for the contractors on minor details that still needed attention. As we moved from room to room, I felt a growing sense of rightness, of coming full circle. What are you thinking about? Lily asked, noticing my contemplative mood. Just how far we've come. 6 months ago, I wasn't sure what our future would look like, if we'd be okay. She leaned against the kitchen island, a beautiful piece of veined marble that we had selected together. Are we okay now? Really okay? I considered the question with the honesty it deserved. Were we okay? The past months had brought challenges I never anticipated. Lily's occasional anger at both Richard and me for disrupting her life, my own moments of doubt and fear as I rebuilt my career, the practical complications of establishing new routines and structures. But beneath those surface turbulences ran a deeper current of authenticity and connection that had been missing from our previous life. Lily and I communicated more openly now, without the buffer of social expectations or Richard's controlling influence. We made decisions collaboratively, whether about household matters or larger life choices. Most importantly, we were modeling for each other what it meant to live with integrity, to align our external circumstances with our internal values, even when that alignment required difficult changes. Yes, I told her with complete conviction. We're really okay. Better than okay. She nodded, seemingly satisfied. I think so too. And I'm proud of us, Mom. Especially you. The simple statement caught me off guard, bringing unexpected tears to my eyes. Proud of me? Why? Because you didn't just get mad or sad when everything happened. You got determined. She gestured around at the house we had created. Together. You showed me that when someone hurts you, you don't have to stay hurt. You can build something new. Moving day arrived with the organized chaos I had anticipated. Movers shuttled furniture from delivery trucks into the house, while Lily directed traffic with enthusiastic authority. By evening, the essential rooms were furnished if not fully arranged, enough for us to spend our first night in our new home. After Lily went to bed, exhausted from the day's activities, I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped out onto the back patio. The night was clear, stars visible above despite the city lights. I settled into a cushioned chair, letting the quiet envelop me. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard. Lily sent photos of the new house. It looks impressive. Congratulations. The message was unexpected, but not unwelcome. Over the past months, as the divorce proceedings concluded and our new normal established itself, Richard and I had evolved a carefully neutral relationship focused entirely on Lily's well-being. I had neither sought nor expected his approval of my rebuilding efforts, yet there was a certain symmetry to his acknowledgement. Thank you, I replied simply. Lily's very proud of her contributions to the design. She should be. I barely recognize her in the best possible way, more confident, more herself. A pause, then another message. You've done well with her through all this. I stared at the text, a complex tangle of emotions rising in response. There had been a time when such validation from Richard would have meant everything, when his approval had been the measuring stick against which I gauged my success as a wife, a mother, even a person. Now it was merely data, information that registered without defining me, a perspective to be noted, but not centered. We're both finding our way, I typed back. Good night, Richard. Setting my phone aside, I leaned back in the chair and gazed. Upward again, tracing constellations I had learned as a child. The woman who had opened that fateful email 6 months ago, shocked, devastated, temporarily broken, seemed like a distant memory, a character in someone else's story. The journey from that moment to this one had been neither straightforward nor painless. There had been days of doubt, moments of weakness, times when the easier path of compromise and reconciliation had tempted me. The decision to sell Richard's cars and our house had been born partly of righteous anger, partly of strategic necessity, a dramatic gesture that had set in motion my reclamation of power in our dissolving relationship. But the true transformation had happened more quietly, in the accumulation of small choices and realizations that followed, in rediscovering my professional identity, in modeling resilience for my daughter, in building relationships based on authenticity rather than appearance. The divorce was final. The house was sold. The cars were gone. All the external markers of my former life had been dismantled and reconstructed in new configurations. Yet, the most profound change was internal, a shift in how I defined my worth and purpose, independent of anyone else's validation or vision. A soft sound drew my attention back to the house. Through the glass doors, I could see Lily had wandered downstairs, probably searching for me. I waved and she joined me on the patio, wrapping herself in a throw blanket against the mild evening chill. Couldn't sleep? I asked as she curled into the chair beside mine. Too excited, she admitted. I keep thinking about all the things we're going to do here, holidays and birthdays and just regular Tuesdays. I smiled at the simple wisdom in her words. Life wasn't built on grand gestures or dramatic moments, satisfying as those could be. It was constructed in the accumulation of ordinary days, in the consistent choice to live authentically within whatever circumstances we faced. Regular Tuesdays sound perfect, I told her, reaching over to squeeze her hand. That's what I want most for us, a life that feels good on ordinary days, not just special occasions. Lily nodded, understanding. Me too. She looked up at the stars, then back at me with a mischievous grin. Though I'm still glad you sold Dad's cars, That was pretty badass. I laughed, the sound carrying into the quiet night. It was, wasn't it? As we sat together under the stars, content in our new beginning, I felt the final pieces of my transformation lock into place. The woman Richard had betrayed, the woman who had received those vacation photos and felt her world collapse, was gone, transmuted through pain and determination into someone stronger, clearer, more authentically herself. In her place stood the woman I was always meant to be, defined not by what had been done to me, but by what I had built from the ashes of betrayal. A woman who had faced her worst fears and emerged not just intact, but enhanced. A woman who had learned that sometimes the greatest act of self-respect is not revenge, but reconstruction. A woman who was, at long last, the architect of her own life. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.